Well, hello, this is Tanya. We're going to talk about some really important things today based on the grace and recovery framework. And we're going to get started with the secret itself. So, what are the two reasons why your loved one is unable to maintain long-term sobriety? So these are two reasons, and I am super interested in what you think. So if you're watching this in the replay, put me some comments down there. Let me know what you think the two reasons are on why folks are not able to stay in long-term recovery. So the next thing, let's look at the reasons why they're not able to stay there. And as we look at that, we have a culture of disconnect. One of the things that you get told when you walk into some of the big groups is just back away, just let them go, just walk away, and that you're powerless. And I'm here to say from the beginning, you are not powerless. There are a lot of things you can do to help change this situation. So I want to introduce myself real quick. I'm Tanya. I run the Sober on Purpose podcast, the Blessed Family Recovery Summit, and I have personally been where you are. That's why it's so important for you to start stepping in and knowing that you are not powerless over this situation. And we're going to talk briefly. This is just going to be a little appetizer about what's coming next. We're going to talk briefly about the things that you can do about that. So the disconnection culture is part of what's keeping us stuck. But the other thing is not realizing the hidden pain that is causing the use, the porn addiction, the substance use disorder, the work addiction, any kind of addiction, is a cry that something is not right, that I am dealing with some trauma, some loneliness, some shame, some guilt, some things like that I need to numb out from. So we're going to talk briefly about that as well. And when I set up this webinar, I laid out some things that we're going to talk about. So when we look at this, there are certain reasons why these behaviors make sense. And I want to talk with you about that. We also can do less and achieve more. And let's talk about what unhelpful help is and what to say, when to say it, and which words to use. Those are important parts of the Grace and Recovery Framework. So as I said, this is going to be a little appetizer. This is not the main course. Jumping in the Grace and Recovery Framework will give you the main course. But let's move on to something that I find super important, is why behaviors make sense. And this is a video from the Center for Motivation and Change. I was blown away by this, and I hope you are too.
Imagine this scenario. You're walking down the side of a two-way street when you look up and see a person trying to cross. There's plenty of traffic, and you can hear cars and trucks whooshing by. The person you noticed looks impatient, upset, frantic, and does not seem to be considering the danger ahead of them. Instead, all they seem to be concerned about is getting to the other side of the street. Take a moment to consider the following. What are your thoughts and feelings about this person and their behavior? And what are some actions that those thoughts and feelings make you want to take? You may be thinking, what's wrong with them? What's making them crazy enough to try and cross traffic without thinking? Are they dangerous? You may be feeling scared for what's about to happen, anxious for the person you're watching, and confused by their behavior. Some actions you may want to consider include moving away from the situation by leaving so you don't have to see the person get hurt, or engaging in the situation by yelling at them to stop to try to promote a positive outcome. Continue imagining the same scenario, only now I'll give you a little bit more information. Before you saw this person, they had been driving further down the road with their dog in the back seat. At a stoplight, the dog jumped out of the car and began running through traffic. The person is now frantically trying to get the dog back inside of the car before it gets hurt. Now take a moment to consider the following. What are your thoughts and feelings about this person after learning about their reason for trying to cross such a busy street? What are some actions those thoughts and feelings make you want to take? You might be thinking, how can I help this person? How do I keep him safe when he's upset and not thinking about his own safety? You might be feeling compassion, sadness for the person's situation, and fear it might go badly. You may be more inclined to take action by offering to help, calling for more help, or trying to intervene in some way. The purpose of this exercise is to show that when another person's behavior seems irrational or erratic or scary in some way, in the way that substance use often does, it can push us into a let me get away from this or make it stop response and make us want to move away from it entirely. It can be hard to see how to be helpful in these situations or to even want to help, while also experiencing our own set of thoughts and emotions as a bystander. By taking a moment to put the behaviors into a larger context, by understanding the why behind their behavior, we can start to make sense of the motivation behind them. We can then decide on a productive way to move forward. So let's think back to the scenario we just imagined. If we start off deciding that the person running in the road is doing it just because they're crazy, then we are also limiting ourselves from seeing the full picture. This way of thinking is natural, but does not facilitate positive action on our part. Instead, if we decide that the person trying to cross the road has a valid or a sympathetic reason for their behavior, we open ourselves up to more understanding. We can now accept new information and learn that the person is trying to find their dog. This information will most likely shift our thoughts and emotions surrounding the behavior, and we'll then be able to come up with and want to come up with a productive plan on how to help them. Finally, let's put this all in the context of substance use. If we decide that a person who is using substances is doing so just because they are an addict, aka a morally bankrupt, irresponsible person, we will very effectively shut out information that could help us understand their behaviors. And without that understanding, we won't be able to find a constructive way to offer support. However, if we open ourselves up to understanding that all behaviors make sense, we will learn that people use substances for valid reasons. Examples could include using substances to ease anxiety, feel more ready to handle daily life, or get to sleep despite physical pain. This type of information will then help us begin moving forward by supporting our loved ones in a productive way.
So that gives us a lot to think about. A lot to think about. So as we're looking at this, how many of you are fixers? This has been your role in the family. So we learned that behaviors make sense because people do things that move them away from pain and into pleasure or even into normalcy. That's a lot of the reasons why people use substance use, why they use pornography, why they use all of those things is just to feel better or to feel normal. And those of us who love folks who are dealing with substance use disorder, pornography, other types of addictions, often are fixers. I'm a fixer, someone who has figured out that that is certainly a problem. And that's one of the reasons that helps keep our people in the place that we are because we're handling it for them. So I wanted to talk to you just briefly. Again, remember, this is just a sample of what goes on in the Grace and Recovery framework is the term helpful help and unhelpful help. So let's just break it down really simply. And I'm sure you've been in this experience. Unhelpful help is doing things for someone else that they can do for themselves. So let's take a minute and think about that. Calling into work for them sick, waking them up in the morning, filling their car with gas, doing things for them that they can do for themselves or things they didn't ask for. Oftentimes we will take care of something and they'll say, no, that's not what I wanted to have happen. I had it just recently with an airplane ticket. I booked the airplane ticket. I had it all ready to go. I thought I was being helpful. And the person I was handling that for said, no, I need to go out a weekend later. I don't think you listened to me. So that's often what we do. Just like you saw when the person was behaving erratically in traffic in the film, it was we would think they were crazy, except for if we knew the reasons they were doing it. So that's where we go back to pain. Where's the pain? That's how we can begin to look at this as the film was talking about. Do we want even to help? Because oftentimes we don't even want to help because we put a label on there and say, this is an individual who, however you're going to say it, in the film they said is morally bankrupt and incapable of making clear decisions. Is that true about the person that you love? Or is that the label that society has put on them? So as we're looking at this, we've been told in many, many groups that you can't cure it, you didn't cause it, and you can't control it. As you're thinking about that, are those true? We're going to get deeper into that in the grace and recovery framework. But here's something I want to give you that's totally different is we do contribute to it. Are we going to contribute to it positively or are we going to contribute to it negatively? So oftentimes we add things into it because of our own judgment, our own anger, our own shame, let alone the person who is dealing with the addiction. We add this in there and create a bigger problem than there was to begin with. Again, back to the disconnection culture that says, let them do their own thing, push them out the door, leave them alone. It's not okay to love them. So that's a huge issue that we deal with. And we work through that piece so that you're not coming from an empty cup. You're not coming from what society thinks. You are free to love your person. You are free to love your person. So one of the other things that I said I would share with you is how and when. So we're looking at this group of people who are actively solving problems together. They're looking at something on the computer. They're trying to figure out how to actively solve this together. They've all come together to do this. So how and when and what to say. This is something else that we work with in the Grace and Recovery program. A lot of this is around positive language. And I know folks have said, but I've tried complimenting, I've tried all these types of things. But when we talk about shame, we also talk about the shame grid. And a lot of times, a person who is dealing with their life through some type of numbing out, which we call addiction, has this shame grid that they cannot hear what you are saying. So how do you break through that? How do you take the little steps and figure out how to compliment, how to reward for behaviors that you want, how to keep the good going and not get stuck in the negative? And one simple thing I'm going to give you right now is timing. So this is my beautiful husband and I, and one of the things that we've learned is timing. So how to say, what to say, when to say it. When is probably one of your biggest issues. And we work with that in the Grace and Recovery framework on how to really know when the best timing is, how to plan that out, and how to think through what you're going to say so that you can actually be heard and so that you can actually get a response. We can't guarantee the response, but just like practicing, firefighters don't just run into a fire. They practice on buildings, they practice in areas where it's safe, they practice together, they practice like a team. So what we're doing in the Grace and Recovery framework is getting you built into a person who has practice so that you know what, when, and where, and how to say what you need to say. And this timing piece is crucial. So if my husband's come home after a long day, I've been working from home all day long, and I've got something really important to say to him, do I want to meet him at the door and just start going ticka, 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 ticka? No. that will make him crazy, right? That will make him absolutely crazy. We talk about how to gently ask for time, how to set up a schedule, and how to layer what you've got to say so that they can take a breath and hear it. All of us have had somebody who came in and demanded something right then when we were in the middle of something else. So if I'm in the middle of cooking dinner and managing the kids at home, and my husband bursts in and says, I need X, X, and X, and X, how am I going to feel? It's very similar when you're working with someone who is dealing with addiction or post-addiction, because the emotions are in multiple layers. And that's something else we're going to talk about, is your emotional wheel and where you come from and how you work through that. So as we pursue this, we are also going to look at some of the biggest hangups. And I just showed you this slide, but these are some of the biggest hangups in you providing and being in integrity for who you are when you are engaging with your loved one who's dealing with addiction. These are all running in the background, and you can't get away from these unless you know they're there. So you can't solve a problem you can't see. These are running in the background, and they make it very hard for you to work with your loved one. So one of the things we're going to do in the Grace and Recovery Framework is take a deep dive into how to manage yourself so that you can be the loving, caring person, and so that you can show love in the way that you need to. Now, a lot of people say, but I've been loving and I've been this, and they don't take it. Well, remember that shame grid, and also remember that clear boundaries are super important. And the most compassionate people have very clear boundaries and know how to use their no. So that's another big piece of the Grace and Recovery Framework. So as we keep talking about this, one of the things that we're definitely going to look at is your self-care. So in that empty space is where you are probably really struggling. When you feel empty, when you feel worn out, when you feel wrung out, you're not going to be able to give. You're not going to be able to give what you need to give. So the self-care piece, even though in the beginning people often think it feels selfish, often think it feels like, oh, I'm not doing all I should for the person I love, it requires you to do this to be able to give from a full cup. When you're giving from an empty cup, you're in a situation that things are just not available to you. And that's often what's happening with your person who is numbing out with their addiction, is they are trying to do their life from an empty place. So this self-care piece becomes absolutely critical in developing and contributing to your loved one's sobriety. So let's go back to this slide that we've all learned. Can't cure it, can't cause it, can't control it. I'm here to offer you hope. Hope that this can change, that you can continue to contribute negatively or you can contribute positively. And that's what the Grace and Recovery Framework is all about. I just gave you a little sample of what you can do as a person in the lives of someone who is struggling with addiction. This goes much deeper in this 12-week life-changing course. And I've designed it as a small group course with many layers that are going to give you the opportunity to get the results you've been looking for, to develop that loving relationship, to know where you end and they begin, to set clear boundaries that you can stick with. Because what people often say to me is, Tanya, it's not hard to set boundaries. It is difficult to keep them. And then that key piece of knowing what to say, when to say it, and what words to use so that you are communicating that you love them and you're going to keep your boundaries. But even clearer is that these behaviors make sense. So the behaviors that they are doing make sense to them. And we spend a lot of time figuring that out and figuring out how to shift from the negative ones to ones that are positive for them, ones that you are able to actually see, ones that you are able to actually see and see when the changes are being made. So I am looking forward to sharing more information with you. We are in the week where we will close this for 3 months after we've got this set up. I am only looking for a small group of people to get started with this. So this is your opportunity to make a change. And we do this in a very small group format, so I can be of utmost help to you, and you can be of utmost help to your loved one. So I was reading the book of Esther this morning and looking at the courage that this young woman, and if you're unfamiliar with Esther, she is probably a late teenage young lady with enormous courage to save all of her people. So this is a biblical story. And what she does is she doesn't come in and demand and nag and scream and yell. She chooses her timing. She manages herself. She asks and invites the person that she wants to talk to a banquet, to a feast. This is what we're going to do in the 12 weeks. We're going to help you get yourself moving and do your self-care and build yourself up so that you are able to help, so you don't feel drugged down by addiction. The other thing that Esther was able to do, her holiday is Purim, which she was able to set up a legacy for her people. She was able to save her people and set up a legacy for her people. All of us who are raising kids in a family that struggles with addiction are worried. We all worry about that. We heard the statistics that we're much more likely to raise people who will struggle with addiction, or they will marry people who will struggle with addiction. But I'm here to tell you, you not only can you break the chain for yourself and your immediate family, but you can break generations of chain. So that's what I really want you to hear today, is you can break generations of chain of addiction by working just you, even if your loved one is not ready, even if your loved one has stopped their substance use, but they are still struggling with how to be in the world. This is going to be so informative and so joy-filled that you will come out and say, hey, why didn't somebody teach me this earlier? So we're taking the tools that nobody gave you and helping you to see, just like Esther, that you can not only save yourself, your loved one, but set up generations of loving, healthy families with clear boundaries and understanding of how to connect and ability to make changes and be flexible when necessary. Because the opposite of addiction is connection. It isn't leaving you powerless. It isn't leaving you to put your loved one out in the cold away from the family. It is figuring out your boundaries, your self-care, your love, and your ability to love and be free to love that person who is struggling. So I'm going to put all those things in the links below. You're going to have an opportunity to check that out, see what's going on. I can tell you that we do have very limited seats because we want this to be a small, intimate group, and that this is available right now because these changes are not something that you want to wait on. If you wait on them, what do we know about any addiction? It degenerates and gets worse. So I'm sorry I haven't been able to answer your comments. Please leave them below. We will offer this as a replay, but I am so excited for you in this opportunity. And just to tell you a little bit more about myself, I've walked this road. This is part of my journey, is to walk this with you and give you the gifts that God has given me, because the more we give it away, the more we give love away, the more we give gifts away, the more everyone's lives changes. And the other reason I do this is I'm raising 2 young men, and I want them to have their best opportunity at marriage and raising a family, and my grandchildren and my grandchildren's grandchildren to live in a community where we can talk about this, where we can say, hey, Let's make the changes we need to make. So I look forward to seeing you in the Grace and Recovery Framework program. I'm going to put links down below. If you have any questions, please reach out and DM me and let me know what I can answer for you. So again, I'm Tanya with the Sober on Purpose podcast, and I look forward to seeing you inside the program. And be sure and hang out in this Facebook group. We're going to keep adding more and more and more to that. So I thank you. Big blessing on your day. And remember to give thanks in everything, because God is in the darkness and He is in the light.